Hi, and welcome to the Elements of Plot, a presentation for the ENH 295 Banned Books and Censorship course at Glendale Community College. This is Dr. Lisa Cooper, and let's get started. All fiction is based on conflict, and this conflict is presented in a structured format called plot. These are the elements of plot this presentation will discuss. We have exposition, foreshadowing, inciting force, conflict, rising action, crisis, climax, falling action, resolution. Exposition refers to the opening information in a literary piece. It also refers to the introduction of the theme in a piece of literature. Basically, the reader gets much needed information about the work from the exposition, usually given at the beginning to set the stage for the work. After the exposition is given to the reader, the rising action begins to unfold, leading to the climax, or the highest point of action in a story. Following the climax is the falling action, where the conflict is set to be resolved, and finally the resolution is put forth and the work is concluded. Foreshadowing is a literary term used extensively by writers that introduces verbal and/or dramatic hints about what will occur later in the story. It means giving the reader a hint of what is to come through the setting, the character's words or actions, or eventually a symbol. Although not necessarily so, it usually implies a warning of something negative or even disastrous that is about to happen through clues interwoven into descriptive passages or the storyline itself. Inciting force in a story is either an event or a character that triggers conflict. It is similar to the climax of the story, the height of the excitement, tension in a story. This is often difficult to understand, so pictured is Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. They make a great example of what inciting force is because both have been accused of triggering the conflict in the Middle East. Conflict is the struggle between the opposing forces on which the action in a work of literature depends. There are 5 basic forms of conflict: person versus person, person versus self, person versus nature, person versus society, and person versus God. Many times you'll hear these conflicts expressed as man versus man, or man versus society, etc. Let's talk about the first 4. Man versus man pits one person against another. Man versus nature is a run-in with the forces of nature. It expresses the insignificance of a single human life in the cosmic scheme of things and tests the limits of a person's strength and will to live. Man versus society is when the values and customs by which everyone else lives are being challenged. The character may bring others around to his point of view or decide that society was right after all. And then lastly, man versus self does not involve other people. The character deals with conflicting or mixed emotions that cause confusion, anguish, suffering within the character. An internal conflict is a good test of a character's values. Does he give in to temptation or rise above it? Does he demand the most from himself or settle for something less? The internal conflicts of a character and how they are resolved are a good clue to the character's character. The rising action in the narrative of a work of fiction follows the exposition and leads up to the climax. The rising action's purpose is usually to build suspense all the way up to the climatic finish. The rising action should not be confused with the middle of the story, but is the action right before the climax. The material beyond the climax is known as the falling action. The conflict reaches a turning point. At this point, the opposing forces in the story meet and the conflict becomes most intense. The crisis occurs before or at the same time as the climax. Climax is the high point of a story in which the major conflicts erupt in some kind of final showdown, a fight, an argument, violent or physical action, or a very tense emotional moment. At the end of the climax, the winner will be clear. However, there is not always a winner. The falling action is the part of the story usually found in tragedies or short stories, but not always, after the climax and showing the effects of some sort of catastrophe or a major event. And finally, we have resolution, or denouement. Denouement is a French word for the action of untying. The resolution is the relaxing or sense of closure or completeness after the climax occurs, a sense of rightness or return to normal or the way that things were in the introduction, except for the slight change in the protagonist as a result of the conflict. Sometimes a story has a surprise or ironic ending. In this circumstance, the resolution is left up to the readers to figure out on his or her own. This type of story is often referred to as a cliffhanger. So that is it for elements of plot. These elements of plot can be used to analyze a piece of fiction, which is what your goal is in this course in your weekly journals. Read your text and choose if it be an element of the plot. Go ahead and analyze it. Make sure you use lots of good examples from the story. That's it.